Handball. And then again. Bayern against Paris, Champions League semifinal. A match that should really be about Kane, about Dembélé, about Kompany, about Luis Enrique, about the road to the final. But what is everyone talking about after the final whistle? About hands. And twice at that. First Nuno Mendes, Bayern are attacking, everyone is waiting for a second yellow card, and suddenly Paris get a free kick? And only a few minutes later, João Neves in the penalty area, that is not a penalty? And in that exact moment, that feeling is back. That feeling from 2022. Germany against Spain. Cucurella, Musiala shoots, the ball hits the hand, everyone screams for a penalty, but Anthony Taylor doesn't blow the whistle. Back then it was one arm, this time it was two. Because maybe this handball is only part of a bigger story between questionable refereeing decisions and moments in which careers, titles and legacies hang on a single whistle. And then come these 2 minutes. So, what really happened in this match? To understand that, we need to go back 1 week to the first leg in Paris, because what happens there is the real reason why these 2 minutes in Munich carry so much weight. Let's take one step back for a moment and just put the numbers into perspective. 9 goals, 22 shots, meaning every second attempt went in. A 40% conversion rate in a semi-final against 2 of the best goalkeepers in Europe. And that is not a coincidence. That is the context of this season. PSG and Bayern are the first 2 clubs in Champions League history to both score more than 40 goals in a single season. PSG 43, Bayern 42. 2 offensive machines meeting exactly when the stakes are highest. What came out of it surprised even people who have followed the sport for decades. It was the first time ever in history of European football that both teams scored at least 4 goals in a semi-final. Not in the group stage, not in the quarterfinal, but exactly at the point where coaches usually play for safety and one mistake costs everything. And then Bayern concedes 5 goals. The last time that happened to them in Europe was in 1994-95, a 2-5 against Ajax. More than 30 years ago. And still Bayern come back. From 2-5 to 4-5 in under 20 minutes. Luis Enrique later called it the best match he has ever been involved in, and he won the Champions League with Barcelona in 2015. But here's the really interesting question. Bayern are not in the semi-final simply because they are good, but because this season they transformed into something else. In 5 knockout matches, Bayern scored 20 goals, 4 per game, the best mark since 1992. That is a system, and this system has a reason. To understand why this Bayern side is so dangerous, you have to go back briefly to a time when Bayern were anything but that. After Nagelsmann comes Tuchel, after Tuchel comes silence. A coaching surge that drags on, a club that after 11 consecutive league titles suddenly no longer knows where it is heading. And then in 2023-24, what nobody really saw coming. Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen, unbeaten, champions, and Bayern are not. That was rock bottom. 11 years on top and then suddenly gone. The answer Bayern gave surprised many people. No huge name, no Guardiola return, but Vincent Kompany, 30 years old at the time, most recently at Burnley, a club he had just saved in the championship shortly before relegation from the Premier League. Bayern fans raised their eyebrows back then. And then this man starts working. First year champion, second year champion again, making him only the 4th coach after Guardiola, Flick and Ernst Happel to win the Bundesliga in each of his first 2 seasons. On top of that, 109 Bundesliga goals this season alone. A new record. The previous one from 1971-72 stood at 101. Kane is playing the best season of his life. Olise works, Diaz works, and Kompany's system works. He turned the team into the most possession-heavy side in the league, while at the same time his players cover 7 kilometers more per match than they did shortly before his arrival. More control and more running at the same time? That should actually contradict itself, and yet it's happening. That is the Bayern squad traveling to Munich for the second leg after Paris, and waiting there is the reigning champion PSG. PSG used to be a very different club. Galactic transfers, galactic wages, and galactic failure. Neymar, Messi, Mbappé. Every year, the same pattern. Title favorites in September, quarter-final exit in March, and then the major clean-out in summer. And suddenly Luis Enrique arrives and tears all of that down. No more superstar ensemble waiting for individual moments, but a system that creates space, forces tempo and is colder than every opponent in decisive moments. Under Enrique, PSG have scored 400 goals in competitive matches. No coach in the club's history has ever reached that mark. Last year, PSG won the Champions League, beating Inter 5-0 in the final, the biggest winning margin in European Cup final history. And this season, Enrique's PSG might be even better. The man who embodies that more than anyone else is Ousmane Dembélé, a player many had written off for years, too injury prone, too inconsistent. And last year he wins the Ballon d'Or in the Champions League campaign. He scored twice against Liverpool in the quarterfinals, twice against Bayern in the first leg, and in the return leg in Munich he scores in the 3rd minute. His very first touch of the ball goes straight into the net. Beside him, Kvaratskhelia. His assist for Dembélé in the 2nd leg makes him the first player in the Champions League history to contribute to a goal in 7 consecutive knockout matches in a single season. 7 in a row. Nobody had ever done that before. And then there's the collective. 10 PSG goals this season were scored by substitutes. That too is a Champions League record. But what really shows what separates this PSG from previous versions is the 2nd leg in Munich. At 1-1, PSG allow the most dangerous offense in Europe to rain attacks down on them for 90 minutes and survive it. But before we talk about the 2nd leg and the moment that really drove Bayern crazy in the end, we need to stay in Paris for a moment, because something happens there that will play a role again 1 week later. Shortly before halftime, Dembélé crosses from the left, the ball flies towards Davies, first hits his thigh and then bounces onto his hand. Davies can't really do anything about it, at least not intentionally, but referee Scherer interprets Davies' outstretched arm as an unnatural extension and concludes that the body surface was unnaturally enlarged. Bayern take that decision home with them. And then in the 2nd leg, almost the exact same thing happens again, only this time on the other side. This time the player is João Neves. Vitinha tries to clear the ball and hits his own teammate João Neves. The ball bounces onto Neves' arm, which is high and clearly away from his body. Bayern demand a penalty, and there is no whistle. So is that a penalty or not? The rulebook does not say clearly. The IFAB law state if a player unnaturally enlarges his body through the position of the arm, it's handball. Neves' arm was clearly above the shoulder height, so exactly that. However, in an interpretation guideline, there's an exception. If the ball comes from a teammate, it is not handball, and that is exactly the exception Pinheiro relies on. But that guideline is not actually the official law. And that is precisely why the comparison to the Bundesliga becomes so uncomfortable. There was almost an identical situation there this season. A defender heads the ball inside his own penalty area against the outstretched arm of his teammate. Ball from teammate, arm away from the body, exactly the same setup. Decision though, penalty. And the Bundesliga uses the same IFAB rules. And that is the point that remains. Not that Pinheiro clearly made the wrong call, but the same situation in the same season under the same rules is a penalty once and not a penalty the next time. But the Neves moment, as confusing as it was, is not actually the scene Bayern are truly talking about. The scene that could have changed the game happens 2 minutes earlier, 29th minute. Konrad Laimer drives the ball forward and plays it ahead. Nuno Mendes stretches his arm, the ball hits him, the body gets bigger, Bayern react, referee Pinheiro blows the whistle and points for a free kick. And now comes the decisive moment. Pinheiro looks at Mendes, remembers the yellow card Mendes already has in his pocket, and you can almost see in real time how this referee hesitates. Because he knows, another yellow now means a red card. PSG would play from the 29th minute onward with 10 men in Munich in the 2nd leg of a semi-final. And then the 4th official intervenes from the sideline, from an angle where he can hardly have seen the incident properly, and tells the referee that Laimer had used his hand beforehand. Pinheiro reverses his decision and gives the free kick to PSG. And when you look at the replays from 4 different camera angles, honestly, you don't see any handball by Laimer. Chest or thigh maybe, but no hand. And this is not the 4th time a 4th official has turned a game like this. Premier League, Brighton against Nottingham Forest. 83rd minute, Morgan Gibbs-White goes into a challenge, already on a yellow card, and referee Robert Jones watches it and signals, won the ball cleanly, no foul. And then once again the 4th official intervenes. Jones changes the call, 2nd yellow, Gibbs is sent off. Both managers lose their minds, both are also sent off. 3 red cards in 1 minute, triggered by a decision the head referee had originally judged differently himself. And that 4th official in that match was Anthony Taylor. The same Anthony Taylor who officiated Germany against Spain at Euro 2024 and did not give the Cucurella handball in extra time, where one team went out that perhaps shouldn't have got out. As the main referee Taylor lets a clear handball incident continue, as the fourth official he intervenes in a scene the referee had already decided. Both with the same result. A team is eliminated and afterward, nobody really understands why. For Bayern that was the 29th minute. PSG would have played with 10 men for over an hour in Munich in the second leg of a semi-final. Instead, free kick PSG. Mendes stays on the field, the game remains 11 against 11. And that is exactly the question that remains after this Bayern-PSG semi-final. Was Bayern even the better team? Looking at the numbers, Bayern had more expected goals than PSG in the second leg. More shots, more possession, more pressure. And across both matches, Bayern had more expected goals than the defending champions. Kane's goal in the second leg came in the 4th minute of stoppage time. And that actually says everything. Bayern were there, but not clinical enough. Not in the moments where PSG in the first leg simply pulled the trigger. 5 goals in 22 shots. And efficiency, Bayern never came close to matching in the second leg. That is Bayern's own share of responsibility in this elimination. And that has to be honestly acknowledged. But that is exactly why those decisions do not become any smaller. PSG win 6-5, a 1-goal difference over 180 minutes, and inside that margin were 2 incidents within 2 minutes. A second yellow card that never came for a player who was already booked, with an outstretched arm and clear context, explained away because a fourth official from the worst angle in the stadium pointed to a handball that nobody could find on 4 camera angles. And a penalty given because of an exception that does not even exist in the official IFAB rule text. Bayern never found out whether they could have stopped it if the evening had simply played out normally. PSG are in the final against Arsenal, and probably deservedly so. But this is football in 2026. Rules that need 2 different documents to explain themselves. And the fourth official, whose job really is water bottles and substitutions, suddenly ends up deciding a semi-final. And maybe that is the most uncomfortable thing about this night. Not the result, but the feeling that remains. What do you think? Would Bayern have won if one of those decisions had been given? Write your opinion in the comments. Ciao and see you next time.